Today I'm going to talk about what the journey so far has been of building a business based on the thing that caused the most stress and suffering and pain in my life. And this thing, this disorder, is known as misophonia. But it's a bit of a trip because misophonia literally translates to the hatred of sound. And it's kind of ironic because hatred implies choice. And I can guarantee you that most people that have misophonia didn't just randomly choose one day that they were going to start hating sounds. And I know for myself that I most certainly didn't choose to start hating the sounds of people chewing loud, of repetitive sniffing, of throat clearing, of breathing heavy, of pens clicking, of all sorts, clocks ticking, all sorts of different things that would send me into a complete and utter spiral, would activate my nervous system, would put me into a fight, flight, fawn, or freeze mode where I would be incapacitated. I couldn't focus. I would run out of the room if I could, punch holes in walls. In classes at school, would just be so fixated on someone sniffing repetitively or breathing loud that I could not take in what we were learning in the class. And I most certainly didn't choose this. In a certain way, in a particular way, it chose me. And how? How did it choose me? Because as a kid, I believe that I grew up having a pretty good life. I, for many years, had thought, oh, I didn't have any trauma as a child, or I was so blessed, until I started to realize and understand the experience that I had. And I'll give you an example of one of the byproducts of misophonia. It started around the age of 10, and as it intensified over the first few months, my ability to sit at the breakfast table or at the dining table with my family became a very stressful and challenging time. I remember at one stage getting a bunch of cereal boxes and creating a little fort around my head and trying to eat my food down in this little fort of boxes to try and block out the sound of my dad breathing. But it didn't work because sound travels. And I remember flipping out one day and running upstairs and punching a hole in the wall and just in a rage and not knowing what was going on, feeling so confused. And again, I most didn't certainly choose this. Basically, from that point onwards, I became so stressful at the dinner table and the breakfast table that I just abandoned. I was in flight mode, and from 10 to 18 years old, I refused to eat at the table with the family. Every maybe one or two very special occasions where there was big tables and I could be away from people that were the more trigger sounds, I would, but I found those moments very challenging and preferred to go off upstairs and eat by myself and watch TV and have the TV up really loud so I couldn't hear anything. When I realized later on in life that I had missed out on 8 years of my developmental phase and my connection with my family around the dinner table, I was very sad about this. It was very sort of disheartening to learn, wow, okay, I basically refused to talk to my dad pretty much from the age of 10 to 18 because he breathed loud and he chewed loud and he made particular faces and certain visual expressions that would trigger me. And you might ask, well, where did this come from? Why did this all of a sudden start at the age of 10? And from the understanding of my own life and also starting to do a lot of research, or not starting, I have been doing a lot of research the past year and longer. And for me, there are multiple factors that unraveled and played out in my childhood that led to this happening. And how I like to describe this to people is that as children, we have a certain threshold for what we can handle and what we can take. And in a stressful environment, these thresholds get tested. And as children, we can't make changes to the environment. We don't have the power, the autonomy as young kids to be able to make changes, or to change our parents, or to change our caregivers, or to change the way that culture and society looks at us or looks after us. So what happens as kids is we change ourselves due to stress, due to feeling unloved, due to feeling not enough, feeling unworthy, feeling like we might be abandoned, or fear of loss, and ultimately the fear of death, that we'll be left out on our own to fend for ourselves, and that we will be at the mercy of the bigger creatures of the world who will eat us up alive. So for me, there was an underlying tension and stress in the family between my parents that at the dining table would seem to be the epicenter of where the stress would unfold. It would kind of all compact and come together at the dining table. And as a little kid, I really wished for my parents to be really nice to each other. And I didn't understand why they would bicker or argue or complain at each other, or, sort of had these arguments and these things. And I really hated it. I really hated how it made me feel, because I would sit there in pain and stress as they would bicker and argue, and that would stress me out a lot. To add to that accumulation of stress over time, there was an accident where I fell off a bunk bed in the middle of the night and I had a serious head knock around the age of 10. And I believe that head knock was like a driver for accelerating the effects of misophonia in a sense. There was already the stress building up, and then that was the straw that broke the camel's back in a sense, which kind of left me with headaches for a while, couple years, quite persistent blood noses, and other sort of developmental pains, alongside the rapid uptake in my response to sounds, the reactivity that was developed to breathing sounds, the chewing sounds, sniffing, coughing, all these things. And I became hypersensitive and unable to deal with the environment around me, and unable to really make sense of how to navigate as a young boy. And my response to that was abandoning and running away and avoiding situations where there would be stress. So this played out from the age of 10 through 18. I left home, I went to university. Throughout those years, I managed to manage it somewhat in peer settings. However, every single day I was still being triggered. It would be, my classroom environments would be going in and surveying the room and picking where I sat based on the type of people that were around. And there were certain demographics of people that would slurp and chew food or eat snacks in class, and so I would avoid sitting next to them. There were certain demographics of people that would sniff or seem to have quite regular colds or flus and be making noises, so I would avoid them. And so, or people that would wear puffer jackets in class and they would be rustling as they're writing and making noise, or whatever it was, there was always a consideration for where I sat based on the people in my class and my analysis of who they were, and if I believed that they would trigger me. And this continued to play out. in, in every situation that I went to. And when I went to cafes and restaurants, I would try and sit on the far left side so I wouldn't have someone to the left of me, because the left side of my left ear would get more triggered by sounds compared to my right ear for some reason. And so if I could sit on the far left side, I was less prone to triggers. Having relationships, earplugs, headphones over top, and any signs of noise or anything I would wake people up. I would not kick them, but I was nudge them like, shut up, you're breathing too loud, you're snoring, blah, blah, blah. And that stress of that, the stress of trying to get to sleep, almost like trying to listen for sounds because I was in a hyper alert mode. So anyway, it had been a long journey. And around the age of 25, I went to South America and I did a 10-day ayahuasca retreat and this great insight actually came not during one of the ayahuasca ceremonies, but before one of the ceremonies, we did a workshop called childhood regression. And in that childhood regression, I saw that experience that I had in the bunk room, falling off the bunk, semi-concussing, knocking myself out, getting put back in bed by my parents because I'd woken them up. And then in a panic, and everyone falling back to sleep and breathing loud and snoring, and me just lying there in this sort of panicked state and feeling abandoned or feeling unloved or unworthy of nourishment, and needing just someone to hug me in that moment as a little kid, as a little boy, needing support, but not having that, and making somewhat of a subconscious decision that I'm the only one that can look after myself. And that created a high degree of independence in my life, or as some previous girlfriends have called it, hyper independence, where I would not ask for help. I would try and do everything on my own, which was a pattern of high achieving, which would then create more stress. And then I would drift because of the stress of trying to achieve and trying to get all these things done. I would drift away from it and avoid and distract. And then I would become hypercritical of all of that. And so then I would try and achieve more and try and push more. And then the pushing more would create more stress. So then I would drift more, and I'd go more into the critic until I would burn out and self-sabotage in some way, shape, or form, whether it was breaking bones, having car accidents, you name it. The array of different things that I've done to my body, I believe subconsciously, in order to seek attention, have been so many things. And some could say, oh, it's just random, but also some could, many teachers out there speak to this reality. And one of the concepts is, first the universe will tickle you with a feather, and then it'll throw a brick through your window, or it might be a pebble, and then it'll be a brick through the window, and then it'll be a truck that comes along and just takes you out completely. And the varying degrees of course correction that our best self is trying to compete with this other part of ourself that is in the stress and the challenge and the pain, and the best self wants the best for us. So then we have this internal dissonance or misalignment, and in that misalignment we then attract the things that show us or mirror back to us the misalignment. And in my case, it seemed to be breaking bones, having big accidents, crashing cars, burnouts, ending relationships, just all these stressful moments where I had lost my level of consciousness and somewhat control of my nervous system or my reactions, and had lost presence, and these accidents happened because I was so caught up in my head in the story of why things weren't going good, or why I couldn't get somewhere, or whatever the stressful situation that I was going through was. So that journey at 25 opened the doorway up to understand, okay, I've seen this initial thing that happened. Now, how do I integrate this? How do I learn about this? And since that time in 2017, it's been almost 9 years now, I have been deep in a journey of understanding myself to nth degree in every level, understanding my physical body and how to really nourish this vessel that we are given on earth, this body, and how to look after it physically, how to exercise, how to eat really clean food, how to stretch, how to create mobility, how to utilize the energy of the sun, and how to get vitamin D into my body naturally, how to balance out the minerals in my system, how to cleanse out toxins and parasites, and doing fasting protocols and doing all sorts of other things to really integrate and live in a healthy body, which I can say now I'm very proud of the body that I live in, and I feel healthy, and I feel great and amazing in my body most days. But I didn't used to feel like this. I used to feel tired and exhausted and have lots of aches and pains. And yes, I still injure myself from time to time, or my body is not perfect, but it's doing pretty well. And I have a lot of trust, and I have a really good relationship with my body. I learned to understand my emotions and to really start to build emotional intelligence, but also emotional awareness and somatic integration, which is understanding cognitively the emotions, so cognitive emotional intelligence, understanding the degree of different emotions, the spectrum of emotions from fear, lust, anger, greed, all the way up to joy, love, compassion, gratitude, authenticity, and learning the spectrum and learning to recognize what state I was in and when I was in those states, and then how to be able to shift those states through processing them and through integrating them, going through them, learning how to somatically integrate my experience by understanding where the emotions are in my body and being able to feel them and being able to hold them and be with them, and not avoid or not distract or go through some type of numbing out process to feel the pain. And I've cried a lot. I've allowed myself to cry so many times, and the release that happens in those processes is beyond words. I've learned to understand my mindset and to really start to work with the mind that I have been gifted. And the mind is so incredibly powerful. When I speak about the mind and mindset, I speak to the language that we speak, and the language that we speak about ourselves and about the others in the world and about the world itself. Anything that we speak to about others is a reflection of ourselves. So if we're critical, or we're judgmental, or we're shaming, or we're projecting out into the world, we're actually shooting those daggers back into ourselves. And when we speak in a kind way about ourselves, not in a sense of bypassing and positively trying to outweigh our problems, but rather choosing to be in a place of acceptance and love with ourselves, is so incredibly powerful. So I just got distracted. One of the workers is walking up along the fence line. So I learned to reframe, so language repatterning, reframe the language that I thought about myself, that I thought about the others, that I thought about the world, that I spoke about myself, about others, and about the world. I've learned to sit and observe the thoughts that come through my mind, because we have a degree of thoughts that come through our mind. We have loud thoughts, we have more quiet, subtle thoughts. We have this deeper truth that is there, which is hidden behind the layers of dissonance that we might experience in our minds. And I've learned to see all those levels and to witness the thoughts that come and arise on a daily basis and to love those thoughts, not resist the thoughts, not judge the thoughts, not criticize the thoughts, because in the real pain is when we judge our judgments, or when we resist the resistance that we're going through, or we're critical of our criticisms. That is actually creating a circular loop which goes back on itself and will actually create more of that stress and that pain. So physical body, emotional body, mindset, mindfulness, language repatterning, creating emotional safety, and all of that, learning how to regulate my nervous system and being able to hold myself in stressful times. And there are so many practices that we can do on a regular basis that change and support our body in a positive way to be more capable of dealing with the stressors of life. Unfortunately, most people live right on the edge, and one little thing can break them. So what we have to do is we have to learn to bring ourselves back down and back down and back down into a grounded place where little things in life are just a blip, and our ability to observe and notice what happens is very sharp and very acute, and we can see it straight away, and we can see it arise, and instead of it blowing up on us, we capture it in our attention and our awareness. We hold the energy of that frequency, and we allow ourselves to process it in the moment. So this is a bit of a long-winded video, but it's basically the process that I've gone through to get to the point where misophonia no longer affects me. I overcame quite deep depression. I experienced some serious anxiety for years in life, and I've overcome that. And I also had some OCD tendencies. I had the misokinesia, which is being triggered by visuals, specific visuals, and then obviously misophonia being triggered by sounds. And I'm not here to say that I'm 100% healed of all of this stuff. Yes, I notice anxious thoughts and feelings, and I notice moments of feeling lonely or slightly depressed. I notice trigger sounds. I notice visual things that would trigger me. I notice a tendency to want to control my environment or have some sort of an obsessive compulsive disorder. I notice all these things and I see them, but I don't let myself get taken over by them anymore. I hold myself and I ground myself in the reality that I've chosen for myself. So through all this, I'm building a course for people called Thriving with Misophonia. I've built an app called MisoCalm, and with all this, designed to help people get to this level in their lives where misophonia no longer creates so much suffering and pain for them, and so they can live and experience the normal moments of life again, where there is no stress when it comes to sitting and eating with the ones that they love, where they can go out into the world and go to cafes and go to restaurants and go to the movie theaters and thrive in workplaces and school environments without the stress of sounds affecting their day and their livelihood. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. I'm going to keep sharing more as this journey unfolds.